Okay, so welcome to the Nalafem Learning Village. This is the second year that we run this. First year was in Nairobi on the second summit. So I'm really happy that we are come to Sierra Leone to host the second Learning Village. Like Stella said, the aim of this Learning Village is for us to recognize that all of us in this room have a lot to share. All of us in this room have a lot of knowledge. And so today, for the rest of the day, I'd like to invite us to imagine feminist power not as something we hold alone, but something we pass on and share. What does feminist co-leadership look like to you? And how can you design systems that reward solidarity across generations? You will hear from leaders of practical leadership and mentorship programs on how you are shaping and how they are shaping women leadership. So to open with the panel, it's my pleasure to welcome our esteemed guests, Lesogo Olfabanye from the African Leadership Academy, Dalry Delang, Senior Program Officer from the Gracia Machel Trust. Sarah Maka, Executive Director for Africa for One Campaign. Baindu Masakoi, Program Specialist of UN Women. So we've spent the whole of yesterday, this morning as well, speaking a lot about power. As institutions on the continent who are running leadership programs that are from us, for our young women. Yeah, for our young women. What is it? Like, what is power, right? We've spoken, power is about interrogating and reclaiming it. It is hard power, it is soft power, it is the power in language. Power is love, power is empathy, power is coordination, power is mentorship, power is service. But as institutions, and I'll ask you, both all to address this, as institutions who are preparing the next leaders or the current leaders, what is power and how are you preparing them to shift power, to handle power differently and to wield it differently?
Would you like me to start?
Yeah.
Thank you for that question, Dr. Reem. I really think that building off of where we stopped this morning, power has to have purpose. I think Madam Sirleaf said it better than we could have captured it. And so when you understand that power has purpose, then you realize what you're wielding it around. For our young people, we have young people, about 100 of them in 12 African countries. And effectively, if we boil it down to its core, power is control over resources. It's relational also. And so what we're teaching our young people is there is an anatomy of power. Understand it. It appears everywhere, in our relationships, in our homes, in our schools, in our friend circles, in government. But there is a core anatomy of power. It is you having resources that someone else needs, effectively. So how do you amass more resources, whether it's in expertise, it's in your experience, it's in finances, it's in relationships, it's in networks. How do you amass more resources so that you can use it to serve? I use that word very deliberately. serve other people. Our young people are exposed in geopolitical conversations. You know, sometimes we can think about where we are in our countries and our local governments, and that's important. But many of the challenges that Africa faces are both domestic and local and geopolitical. So what are the systemic barriers that affect African countries from actually thriving and being all that they can be? So we're teaching our young people to understand the power dynamics in geopolitics, to understand what it takes to sit with an MP from the EU, because the EU and the AU are having a summit in Egypt this year. So are already working with both parts of the divide, the EU and the AU, to articulate where Africa's needs are, to articulate that from their experience, because their experience also has power. So just a summary is that power is control over resources, and there is an anatomy of power, and you can identify how much power you have in the expertise you have, in the networks you have, in the finances you have, in your voice. And that power is codified because someone else wants it or someone else needs it, and you can use it to serve.
Thank you. Dalry, Gracia Michel Trust is incubating an adolescent girls movement. What lessons can we learn from adolescents organizing spaces and mentorship in terms of co-leadership, and how this changes what power is?
Can you hear me? Thanks. Thanks for that, Dr. Reem. I would say that our Pan-African Adolescent Girls Movement program, which is incubated by the Gracia Michel Trust, has learned, what we've learned mainly is that mentorship and co-leadership are not just program strategies, but these are relationships that are built on trust. They are relationships that are built on collaboration, and also, very importantly, relationships that are built on the brilliance and the agency of young girls, right? And so one of our key learnings in relation to mentorship is that adult stakeholders are not supposed to be leading, simply walking from the front, and telling girls what to do with their bodies, what decisions to make and how to make them, when to make them, but rather to walk besides them, right? And so within our movement, we actually call some of our adult stakeholders allies, because we are of the belief that allies are supposed to co-create with the girls and collaborate with them. And very specifically, adult stakeholders are supposed to be the ones who are listening to the girls and learning from them, but also creating safe spaces where they can continuously lead boldly, but also make mistakes safely, because they're young, right? And we want them to be able to learn how to make mistakes very safely. And then I would say, in relation to co-leadership, something that is very important for us is that co-leadership shouldn't be something that's symbolic, that we're using as this beautiful phrase and that's just up in the air, but rather it should be used programmatically as a structural foundation when it comes to working with young people. Co-leadership demands that the girls are sitting at these decision-making tables. But even like we heard this morning, that they're creating their own tables, right? Co-leadership demands that the girls are giving their input, but also that adult stakeholders are held accountable. Co-leadership gives the adolescent girls and young people opportunities to be able to walk ahead when they need to, walk behind when they need to, listen, learn, lead at any point. And I think equally as important is co-leadership is the type of leadership that our continent so desperately needs right now. Leadership that is rooted in care, leadership that is rooted in collaboration, but also leadership that is rooted in justice. That's what I would say.
Yeah, justice. I mean, it's a big conversation we heard about yesterday as well, right? We'll speak about, so just heads up, we're gonna speak about like budgets a bit more, right? And like, what does that mean in terms of justice, in terms of leadership, in terms of like our objective here in getting women into these leadership positions. But I'll turn to you, Lesoga, right now. At the African Leadership Academy, what leadership training models have been most effective in nurturing political ambition that has power?
I think for us at the African Leadership Academy is that we focus on leadership that is multi-generational, not just intergenerational. I think there's this concept when we build peer networks or near peer networks that we only seek to place people within positions of power or proximity to power, but we don't think that even building the networks around who they are as young people and how they're co-creating on important issues within the African continent is important. So we organize our sectors around 7 key issues within the continent: agribusiness, infrastructure, governance, which is what I'm overseeing, professional services, and others. And we think when we create these sector communities that young people can co-organize against, that stakeholders can also input and join together with our young people that we help and collaborate with. This pushes them further to accelerate their leadership potential and how they can impact the continent around key issues that we know affect us in our different countries. So it is not just about saying, oh, young person, here's a leader who is important and connect with them, but also think about your peers who in 10, 15 years, these are the organizations, these are the people that you'll be leading change with in an impactful and powerful way. It's not enough for us to just have this rhetoric around, oh, leadership is important, and young leaders are the leaders of tomorrow, and so on and so forth, without actually building the platforms of convening around specific issues that impact our continent. So that is how we've been very effective, and we've noticed how this has accelerated the path and the movement of leadership journeys for our young people.
Yeah. Thank you. Bindu, UN Women. We've had a lot of UN presence from yesterday, DSG speaking today, but I'd like to speak about the multilateral space. When it comes to peace processes, we heard yesterday as well there is this demystification, I think, that's happening now with multilateral spaces in terms of there's a crisis, there's a conflict, and young people are looking to the multilateral space. They are looking to the United Nations structures and frameworks to intervene for them. How do we infiltrate the multilateral space? So as institutions, as different mentorship programs that are happening within these circles, how do we get more young women into these multilateral spaces so that the next generation, the adolescents as they become young, the Gen Z, Gen Alpha, when they turn to these multilateral spaces, they get the response that they look for?
And thank you. So, like in the UN now, it's mainly the Gen X's that have the power, and in the midst of this crisis, the way to go is strengthening our existing platforms. And for Africa, for like UN Women, we have the African Women's Leadership Network, which is a powerful platform for women. There's a caucus for younger women where they can influence their own power, their own dialogue. But at most of the time, these young women are at the periphery and don't actually have access to where they can yield the power. For like Sierra Leone, we've been pushing like intergenerational dialogue, and not on a one-off workshop or one-off space. It's actually a program, Changemakers program, wherein young women, young and also young men, are placed within our communities where we run our programs, so they can actually be mentored for over a period of time, 3 months, 6 months, and that dialogue continues between them and the organization that they're working with. At the same time, it's a two-way learning. We learn from them, and they learn from us, and it's amazing the way the thinking of young people. It's actually changing the way we are doing our planning. It's actually changing the way we our own mentoring programs. They have a lot of inputs. They have a lot of ideas. So for me, power also means inclusion. Having younger people that may not be in your sphere of thinking, also having inputs to the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So now that we've got done with our institutions, I want to talk to you as women who responded to the gap, right? Like, why are we in this space of capacity, capacity building, enabling, holding space for trust for the women who come to us to prepare themselves for this journey, okay? So the elephant in the room is that funding to leadership programs, to mentorship programs, is dwindling, or it's been cut for a lot of the organizations, I think, that are here today. There are many conversations we're going to be happening in the learning circles that are going to speak to the funding crisis. Something that we're trying to do today, right, and that we do with the learning villages is bringing us together so that we can work more together, right? We're 55 countries, right? The population is vast. Nalafem, ALA, Gresham Shell Trust, One Campaign, UN Women, and the various She Leads, I know is in the room as well, are not going to reach the amount of young women that we need to reach. But for us, we need to start working beyond the institutional barriers that we have and thinking about power as well as us as institutions that hold the space for enabling and capacity building. How do we, though, now shift the narrative, and not just the narrative, but the practice of dealing with financing in a way that the generation that we are supporting to now handle budgets, to handle the financing crisis that they are inheriting from us, right? To do it in a way that does not spark competitiveness, does not spark gatekeeping, but rather calls for a response of innovation, and for us to look internally to rethinking about philanthropy that doesn't come from outside, but comes from within. And we can start with Lesogo.
Okay, sure. I think for us specifically at ALA, we have always seek to be collaborators with the people that we work with in this space. There's a perception that there's actually abundance in the funding space. And as advocacy organizations or organizations working within this type of work of capacity building, we have been led to believe that you have to hold all the resources, hold all the information regarding potential funders, people who are looking to invest in the space. That has not been the case. In fact, our problem is actually reversed. We have supportive funders through the Fruzi Foundation, for example, who are great supporters of our governance work and our fellowship and Holy We Africa Fellowship, where we place young people within government offices or ministerial offices for 2 years. Our problem is actually the demand side. So we're not getting enough of those opportunities for our young people. Just in this room, there are a lot of powerful people sitting at certain levers that can push policy or push advocacy. But now we are finding it hard to go back to our funders and say, we have supporters in the room, we have people on the continent who are willing to partner with us. So what we need is for our funding to demonstrate impact, and we need stakeholders to actually collaborate with us to push the demand for these programs. So it is difficult to go back to a funder and say, we have 20 more young people, but we also have 20 placements for them at ministerial level, at permanent secretary level, to push this narrative. So actually, funders are there, they're willing, they want to do this work, but we're not partnering enough as organizations within this space.
Yeah, I love that, and I think, so there were some murmurs, about where do we want to mentor, where do we find them, right? And it's really about finding them within these spaces that are creating values, nurturing values of young women who would fit into your mentorship values as well, right? So this is where the pipeline, so to speak, is for when you're doing capacity building. Dalry, would you like to?
Yeah, I would say that with our program, it is structured in such a way where it's not so much about the funding that's there, so whether funding is there or not. The important part is that we're building the capacity of the girls by giving them the skills, the tools, the knowledge that they need, right? Because that's really what power is at a young age. At a young age, without knowledge, without the tools, without skills to actually sit at decision-making tables and know how to advocate for yourself, you'll just be kind of floating around and doing things, you're punching the air, right? And so when you give the girls this, when you give them the tools that they need to be able to go into their communities and become change agents, then you are sustainably allowing them to continuously change. And it's built in such a way where this generation of adolescent girls are nurturing the next and helping the next generation to grow and so forth. So it's about the human capacity more than it is about the funding capacity. And that also deals with the issue of gatekeeping, because now you're forced to have this mentorship approach. You're forced to pull the other girl along with you and to open gap for her and open space for her to go into the next generation, as opposed to holding on to the space so frantically because you don't want to let go because you're so hungry for power, right? So yeah, I think that would be my, that's our approach to funding.
Yeah. And moving away from mentorship programs that are just, let's have a call once in a while, to let's work together and have that work being paid labor.
So it feels like I want to have a little bit of a different conversation. And let's talk about money. Let's just talk about raw money, right? So we know that whoever controls the money controls the message, controls the movement, controls the mission. So whether they're philanthropic entities, you know, and I'm funded by philanthropic entities, or they're local or external, whoever is giving you the funding has a lot more sway than you can ever imagine. So once we establish that, then we need to talk about two levels of funding. There's the personal and there's the institutional, right? So I was here a bit yesterday where people were talking about running for office. One of the things I want to do in my personal capacity is run for office, but I know that resourcing is important to me, because with more resources, I have more of a voice in the political space. So there must be a pathway for my personal resource journey, because I know where I'm going to serve. There's also institutions who can provide you money, resources that align with your mission. So, but you have to be in a very bold situation where you reject money because they're forcing you to do something else that you don't want to do. And money comes to people who are very clear about the vision and where you're going and how to get there. And you will find it. It will come and meet you. But then along the journey, you might have to say no to this money and no to that money because it doesn't align with your mission or your vision. And then let's next level talk about where we are on the continent. External money from outside Africa and internal money from inside Africa. Now, we want agency, we want power. Every time we cede our mission to external funding, we give away a little bit of our power. That's just the honest, kind of raw conversation here. So it behooves us on the continent to start thinking through doubling down how we can raise more funds internally. And we are a generous people. We just don't do philanthropy like the West does philanthropy. There's no one man that has a big foundation and gives it, many. We do one-to-one, community to many to one. That's how we do philanthropy. But we can't be the richest continent on the planet and still be the poorest. That paradox, our generation has to change, right? So there's the external funding and the external outside Africa, internal inside Africa. And one of the moments that we're in is such a blessing of a moment, where ODA, which is the external funding, is being cut. It's a forcing function for us to look within. It's a blessing that was given to us, and we never waste a blessing or a crisis, as they say. So how do we think through now how to generate more resources within Africa? And then the last thing I'll say is just around collaboration over competition. Sometimes what money allows us to do is to be competitive. Oh, if I can make sure I'm shining, it's my organization that does this, then I'm the one that has the money, right? But we have to be a generation that says the issues we're trying to solve is bigger than one person, which is the truth. So any organization that says, I will solve it, is lying. So let's align our values to say, actually, it will take a village of organizations, because it always takes a village to do anything good. It will take a village to solve this problem. So as funders are coming to say, oh, you're my darling, how do you pull other aligned organization with you to say, actually, we can't do without them too? Because there's power in being a grantee when you can in the same way collective action matters, collective action around grantees matters. If you pull grantees together and say, let's tell this funder, because there's a journey before we become a lot more self-sufficient, right? So as we're on the journey to self-sufficiency, you pull together and say, hey, dear big donor, the 5 of us, the 10 of us are doing this work together. And we want you to fund us as a collaborative, as a cooperative. We can do that. It's our voice, right? And it's our organization. So I just want us to be bolder about, A, where money comes from, and B, how to manage up the sources of funding so we can ensure that we are making impact on the ground. Thank you.
Baindu, I think that we have seen through, the UN has sort of, been the battleground for, ODA cuts, threats to we're cutting this if you don't do this. How is UN Women, also, rethinking funding internally? I know you must have been a part of many conversations with feminist organizations and young women organizations calling for core, unrestricted funding, which really means, in terms of the requirements not requiring a physical space, we've moved beyond that, allowing collective work as well. But give us a little sneak peek. What's happening within UN Women?
Yeah, the cuts are real. Like for our organization, we thought that it would have started next year, but it started now. So much of the strategies that you've discussed are what we've been talking about. Partnership with organizations that as the UN we would normally not partner with, but we have to think outside the box. And we have the same objectives, empowering young women, empowering young people, and also thinking of partners that we would not have normally partnered with. And there's a lot of discussion of how can we move with private sector organizations, how can we move with philanthropies, how can we partner with even the academia to empower young women, young girls. In Sierra Leone, we've been speaking a lot to NGOs, international NGOs, local NGOs, who have been working within that space of empowering young girls, young people, young people. We're all doing the same work. So how can we better collaborate? Where can we fill in the gaps? Where can we map out, like, the country? Where's the need? Where is, like, Freetown is not Sierra Leone. We have so much empowerment going on in Freetown. And what about Falaba, one of the furthest places? Why are we not empowering young girls there? How can we use the limited resources that we have to make impact? So it's more about partnership. It's more about moving from the space that we are comfortable with. It's more about seeking new grounds.
Thank you. So we all have a pledge, okay? Did you know? Pardon? Oh, okay. Okay, I'm sure you remember. Okay, so we all have a pledge, right? We've heard the asks. ALA has said, we have the cohort, we have the young women. We are now looking for the people to mentor them into the workspaces, right? We have heard from, adolescents in terms of, like, how do we work with them and walk with them, right? Power in terms of the funding, right? So we have with us as well people who, running business, private sector in the room as well. And then UN Women, our great partner. What pledges, so I know I had a conversation with you about the pledges and the budget allocation, right? What pledges do you have for us?
I'm going to start because Dr. Reem and I had a conversation about, the pledge has that with budget allocation of X that we were talking about is left blank often. And the reason why it's left blank, and I was trying to express, is that because budgets are so sensitive, you actually don't want to make a unilateral call on a budget. It's a collective decision. A good leader should have discussed it in their teams or will discuss it with their teams. That's why it's hard to sit and make that proclamation. And also because we see, and I work in the geopolitical spaces, we see a lot of pledges they call them recycling. So I could say I'm pledging $150,000 for X, but I know that I budgeted it already and I was going to do it. So that's not a new pledge, right? So there's a way to game the system. So I just want us to be honest about the new things we're going to do as opposed to the things we're already doing. So with that, I can pledge to go back to my team to think through the budget allocation we need to increase, because our mission and our joy is to train more geopolitically aware local African young leaders. That's our mission, and that's what we want to do. So I'm going back with my team to see what budget allocation we can strive to get to increase this for 2026. I can commit to that. Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah, and we'll follow up.
Excellent.
I'll follow with that as well. Obviously, we need to go back to the team and discuss further. However, similar to organizations sitting here and in the room, our commitment is always to create these opportunities to accelerate the path of political leadership and public service leadership for women. We are on our third cohort of the fellowship, and one of the difficult things is that we haven't been able to place a lot of our young people, a lot of our women, with leaders of political power who are also women. And so while we have already committed funding to it, I think what we need and what our call to action would be is to create the spaces and the pathway to women who are already in leadership. The fact that we've only had 3 women who have taken on fellows at that level is disappointing when our cohort, at least 50% is women. And so the funding we've already committed to, but we would like to accelerate that path to women who are already in power so that they see themselves in these positions. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. So for ourselves as the Graça Machel Trust, even though we are a very young organization, I'm in a very young program, the Adolescent Girls Movement Program, I would like to pledge on behalf of the organization that while we have only been able to reach about 4,500 girls in the past 4 years, we are committed to, whether we have the funding or not, we are committed to reaching 10 million adolescent girls by 2030. And this is going to happen, like you said, in partnership with other organizations such as ourselves. I mean, we heard how Armin was speaking so boldly yesterday about the fact that you cannot have lasting peace without adolescent girls, because we know that they're still the most vulnerable people in the world. And so that's our pledge, that's our commitment. And very so on Demand 7, which says inclusive, equitable, and quality education, because they deserve it, right? We're not even supposed to be talking about a human right at this stage. It's a must, right? And so that is our commitment, and that is our pledge from the Graça Machel Trust.
So for you and women, I'm looking at the pledges, and there's so many that we could pledge to, but the funding crisis. So I will pledge to Demand 10, which is on intergenerational co-leadership, and I pledge to mentoring of young women leaders, like my colleague panelists before. I'll have to discuss that, and in terms of the budget, and I think that, for 2026 and for the next 4 years, that will be our pledge. Thank you.
So I invite you to deposit it into our little ballot box.